Amy Goodman. The massive protests in Egypt have entered their 7th day as tens of thousands pack into Tahrir Square in Cairo. Protesters are vowing to stay in the streets until President Hosni Mubarak resigns. A general strike was called for today, and a million-man march is being organized for Tuesday. The Egyptian government continues to crack down on protesters and the media. Earlier today, 6 Al Jazeera journalists were arrested, their equipment seized. On Sunday, Egyptian authorities closed Al Jazeera's offices in Egypt and removed the news station from the main TV satellite provider. The Internet has been completely shut off across most of Egypt. One of the only Internet service providers still operating is the Noor Group, the company that manages the service for the Egyptian Stock Exchange and banks. Social networking sites such as Facebook and Twitter have been completely shut down. Well, Democracy Now!'s senior producer, Sharif Abdel Kouddous, is in Egypt, and we've developed a workaround to circumvent the Mubarak regime's Internet blackout. His round-the-clock tweets are being read around the world. Last night, CNN International highlighted one of them.
Let's go to a trends map here that we're looking at to see the trending topics out of Cairo on Twitter. Now, still at the top here is Mubarak, but what's interesting to note is how al-Baradei has come up in popularity so much in the last few hours. That's referring to Mohammed al-Baradei. Now, let's see what some Twitter users there are saying about him. Baradei, seen as non-corrupt, is respected, but he lived away too long, didn't join earlier protests, and this revolt was done without his help.
That was CNN International last night reading one of Sharif's tweets. Sharif grew up in Mubarak's Egypt. He was only 3 years old when the current regime came to power. He comes from a prominent Egyptian family with a long history in the arts, literature, film, and politics. Sharif, you landed in your home city of Cairo just a few days ago, but it was not the same country you grew up in. Describe your feelings and what you have found, but start at the airport.
Well, Amy, I've traveled to Egypt countless times from the United States after I moved there for college and then work. And when my plane from JFK touched down in Cairo International Airport on Saturday, the day after the massive protest where the protesters beat back the Interior Ministry, police, and state security forces, I did land in a different country than the one I had known my entire life. Egypt has been reborn. This is not Hosni Mubarak's Egypt anymore, and no matter what happens next, it will never be again. This is an unprecedented popular uprising, the likes of which myself and many others never thought they would see under President Mubarak. They are taking to the streets, men and women, rich and poor, all segments of society. They're defying the curfew for the past 2 days, packing into Tahrir Square, and their mood is celebratory and it's victorious. They are sure that they will not leave until Mubarak does, and they are chanting in the streets every day. They talk about what has taken place over the past week with such pride in what they have done. They tomorrow marks a week from the January 25th National Police Day, when the first protests began and culminated on Friday. Friday was essentially a battle between the Interior Ministry and the people won. They talk about how they came up on the bridges leading to Tahrir, faced off with hundreds and hundreds of riot police from the Interior Ministry, from the state security forces, and were met with violence. They talk with how they walked with their hands up in the air, showing that they were coming peaceful, chanting Salmeya, Salmeya, which means peacefully, and they were beat down. They were tear-gassed over and over again. And I'm not talking about, hardcore activists and protesters, which have been taken to the streets increasingly over the last few years. I'm talking about people who had been depoliticized over the last few years, people from the middle class, young, the Facebook generation. What one person told me, this is the revolution of the Facebook generation. They came out in droves, old and young, and they took to the streets. And what one person told me was, when they would be beat down and tear-gassed, others would come in and rush the police, and then they would fall down, and others would come back after them. And they said, we gave each other courage. And as of 5:30 p.m., the police completely disappeared, reportedly on order, from the streets of Cairo. They were in full retreat and they have disappeared. There's not a traffic policeman in Cairo. There's not any police anywhere. They have come down into the streets today. But since then, the military came in, and as many saw the images on the screens of how the military was greeted warmly on the streets of Cairo. You know, crowds were roaring with approval as tanks rolled in. And what's important to understand is that, you know, over the past decades, 3 decades, the state security forces and the police have been brutalizing, have been torturing the Egyptian people, have been wrongly imprisoning them, have been corrupt. But the army has not done this. The army has not had an interaction with the civilian population since the 1973 war with Israel. And so people trust the army. I've seen unbelievable scenes in Tahrir Square where tanks have been just covered with people riding on the turrets of the tank and all over the tanks, chanting. They pray on the tanks. They chant Gish, Shab, Eid Wahda, which means the army, the people are one hand. And I've seen soldiers carried on the shoulders of crowds, through the crowds, chanting, holding flowers. Now, it remains to be seen what will happen going forward. Yesterday in Tahrir, at 4 o'clock, there's been a 4 p.m. curfew yesterday. Today, it's actually 3 p.m. I'm talking to you, and the curfew is now in effect. I will be going to Tahrir after this interview, but people are in defiance of any kind of authority until Hosni Mubarak leaves. And yesterday we saw in Tahrir military jets, 2 fighter jets, and a helicopter continually swoop and do flyovers over Tahrir Square right at 4 p.m. when the curfew went into effect, and the jets kept getting louder and louder as they came lower. And whether it was an act of intimidation or not is unclear, but the crowds did not care. They waved and whistled and shouted to the planes as they passed overhead. There really is an unbelievable feeling of community now, of people coming together. I've never seen Egypt this way. People are picking up trash in Tahrir Square. People are handing out food. People are helping each other. People are sleeping in the middle of Tahrir Square and setting up tents in the middle of the square. It is a scene that is very emotional. It's something that no one thought could come together. It's largely leaderless. I mean, there's no one organizing group. This is a popular uprising across all segments of society. Opposition groups have come now into the fold. The Muslim Brotherhood is here and other opposition groups, but people don't want it co-opted. And you know, one of the things that I witnessed that was very moving was a lot of the Brotherhood started chanting Allahu Akbar, and then, which means God is great in Arabic, and then the counter chant that was much louder, reverberating over them, was Muslim, Christian, we are all Egyptian. And that really symbolizes what's happening here in Egypt today. And, you know, Amy, I've seen some reports. I've had very little access to any kind of outside news. They really have shut down. The internet is completely shut down here. Cell phones do work now, and people are starting to be able to call each other. There is no texting, no SMS texting goes out, and they're very afraid of the internet because Facebook was how they organized this uprising to begin with. It was organized on Facebook, and there's also mass SMS texting that is very common here in Egypt, and so they've kept that shut down to try and cut off the communications from people. But people in Cairo do not care. They are going right now. I can see droves heading to Tahrir, and what's significant, they go at the time of the curfew. They go when the curfew is there, and then that's when they start heading out. And there's been many reports of violence, of looting, and I just want to be very clear about this, that there was a significant amount of looting on Friday after the police completely disappeared from the scene. Certain places in Mohandesin and downtown Cairo were burnt, banks were burnt, some shops were looted, and you know, there's been reports of armed gangs coming around and robbing houses. Some of that did happen, yes. But what's been amazing and what's also kind of another phase of how this is Egypt coming together in this popular movement is that people have taken to the streets and formed these very efficient neighborhood watch committees. Where I live here in Zamalek, there's groups of men, young and old. They stand, they form barricades. They're armed with metal pipes, some with bats, some do have guns. And what they do is they check people coming in, they check their IDs, they're very courteous, they allow people to go through if they believe you live in the neighborhood. They've really, they're protecting their own, they're protecting their homes, they are directing traffic. Well, the traffic cops are back in the streets of Cairo today, but before that, they were directing traffic. I've never seen Cairo traffic so smooth. One former diplomat I spoke with said it's amazing. These 15-year-old kids are doing such a much better job than our traffic police. That's the story of what's happening here. And people are so fed up with Mubarak, it's hard to describe. They curse him, they want him to step down, and they will not leave the streets of Cairo, the streets of Egypt, until he does.
Talking to Sharif Abdel Kouddous on the ground in Cairo, who has figured out a workaround and is tweeting tweets who's being seen around the world. You can go to our website at democracynow.org so you can see what Sharif is reporting throughout the day, as well as his blogs each day of what is happening in Cairo.